For the Wild podcast is community supported. Please consider making a contribution at forthewild.world. Also, rate us on iTunes to help grow our community. If you're a musician and would like your song showcased on the podcast, upload your tunes on our website. In other news, we were able to premiere our first film, When Old Growth Ends, at South by Southwest this week. We are incredibly honored to share this film, this offering of love and reverence to end old growth logging in the Tongass National Forest of Alaska.
The silence is broken by somebody crying, trying to be heard, never a word. Always the attitude, sort out your own, always alone. Wishing for something the world is denying. Out in the wilderness somebody's crying. Somebody wishing for something to happen, wishing to tell, wishing to help. Someone was listening, someone who cared, never despaired. Someone to lean on and someone to trust, who needs your assistance and finds your disgust.
Welcome to For the Wild podcast. I'm Ayana Young. Today we are speaking with Rue Mapp. Roo Mapp is the founder and CEO of Outdoor Afro, a national not-for-profit organization with offices in Oakland, California, and Washington, D.C. Rue oversees a carefully selected and trained national volunteer leadership team of 62 men and women who represent 26 states around the U.S. and shares opportunities to build a broader community and leadership in nature. Her important work has generated widespread national recognition and support. In 2010, Mapp was invited to the White House to participate in the America's Great Outdoors Conference, and subsequently to take part in a think tank to inform the launch of the First Lady's Let's Move initiative. She was appointed Program Officer for the Stewardship Council's Foundation for Youth Investment to oversee its grant-making program from 2010 to 2012. Since that time, Mapp's work and op-eds have been featured in publications including The Wall Street Journal, Backpacker Magazine, Seattle Times, Los Angeles Times, Ebony Magazine, Sunset Magazine, NPR, and many more. Rue's work has also been recognized with numerous awards and distinctions, including the Root 100 as one of the most influential African Americans in the country, 2012 and 2016, Outdoor Industry Inspiration Award, National Wildlife Federation Communication Award, received alongside President Bill Clinton, and Family Circle magazine selected Rue as one of America's 20 most influential moms. She is proud to serve on the Outdoor Industry Association Board. In 2014, Rue was appointed to the California State Parks Commission by Governor Jerry Brown. A graduate of UC Berkeley with a degree in art history, Rue's skills and background make her a unique voice via the leadership and programs she has instituted through Outdoor Afro, enlightening a diverse community to the wonders and benefits of the outdoors. Rue resides in Oakland, California, and is the proud mother of 3 active children. I'd love if you could start us off by sharing a bit about your story, as well as Outdoor Afro's, and what led you to birth this organization.
I'm frequently asked that question, and depending on who the asker is, you might get a slight, variation from the public view. But for me, your words you said birth, and that word very much resonates with me when I think about Outdoor Afro and just how it quickly became my North Star after talking with a mentor when I was on the verge of applying to grad school and hauling my children across the country potentially. She knew that was going to be really hard to do. I had actually been divorced for several years by that time and had gone back to school to complete an undergrad degree at UC Berkeley, as you mentioned, because I had never finished it. Starting a family interrupted those plans. And after divorcing, I realized I needed to take care of the unfinished business and, got very excited about the prospect of going to business school. I had started a business. I had worked at Morgan Stanley as an analyst and had gone as far as I could go in that organization without more education. So going back to school for me was really about opening more doors to sustain, the economics of the family. But something bigger happened. That mentor asked me a question that I think everyone should ask or answer at some point in their life. And she said, or asked, if time and money were not an issue, what would you be doing? And it was this magic moment that was presented to me where I opened my mouth and my life fell out. And I said, I'd probably start a website to reconnect African Americans to the outdoors. And everything that I'd experienced in life came into such a sharp, pinpointed focus about what I needed to do next. And within 2 weeks after that conversation, Outdoor Afro was born from just a simple blogger template in 2009. And it was the moment that social media was still fairly new. So from my kitchen table, I was able to have this dialogue about the outdoors and what it meant to me, what it meant growing up both in Oakland and in Lake County on a ranch that my dad put together and oversaw for many years, where I learned to hunt and fish and ride my bike on country roads, and how we had this container in nature for family and other community members to spend time with each other. So from a very young age, I had this connection to people and to place, and Outdoor Afro began as a platform to tell those stories. And I also had a love for technology and was an early adopter of the internet, but also beforehand did lots of coding and just had a relative ease with using digital platforms to connect with people. So Outdoor Afro was really a coming together of all of those things. It was born out of a time in life where I had to think about my next moves, and I was willing to give myself over to it. And ever since then, I mean, I haven't really looked back. I've not, I did not plan to build a national not-for-profit organization at that time. A national conversation emerged out of that blog that propelled me into the White House the following year for the America's Great Outdoors Conference. And in that moment, I was able to see that there was an entire field of people who have been having these conversations about people and place and the environment and trying to make sense of it all and to reach even broader audiences. So I just had a number of serendipitous moments in those early months of starting Outdoor Afro that I can clearly see brought us to where we are today. So that's a long version of the how did we get here. It was absolutely an aha moment on one hand, but on the other hand, it was an open door of everything that makes me who I am. And I have to admit that it's the first time in life, from a personal perspective and professional one, where I get to be all the parts of who I am. And because of that, the work gives me back more than it takes away. And I can do more than I've ever done before with joy and ease. That's where we are today. And now I'm running an organization that I'm thrilled to continue to nurture and find support for and enjoy all the people who are a part of it.
I was just thinking about the times atop mountains or under ancient trees or in the snow or out on the oceans as birds dive. It's this incredible time to heal physically, spiritually, emotionally, mentally, a time to be inspired and to ground oneself. And being with the earth is when the loneliness of our messy, unjust society can fade into a sense of belonging in the great web of life. And there's just so many benefits that come to mind when I think of people reconnecting with Earth who have never had access to wild spaces before due to systemic barriers. But I'm curious to hear from you. What are some of the shifts that you've witnessed in people that have instilled just how meaningful this work is?
Well, there are two really important things that I've learned in this work, and you spoke very eloquently to the first one. That is the healing power of nature, and the need for us to recognize nature as a powerful platform or conduit to solve all our problems, quite frankly. The answers are there. I remember when I was rock climbing for the very first time, and I share the story a lot because it's something that stuck with me, where I was climbing and didn't have the proper light gear, and was sent up before we lost light so I could take advantage of what little sunlight was left, because we were going to camp at the summit. After a day of practice climbs, I was still very anxious about rock climbing. We had an outdoor connection growing up in my family, but we weren't mountaineers. And I, found myself going up slowly and got stuck finally in the middle of the ascent, and just was frozen. I just could not go forward, and I was having, a breakdown of sorts. And my instructor leaned over and said these magic words. He said, "Rue, trust your feet." And that unlocked something in me. And I scrambled to the top. And I don't know, I can't explain how it happened, but it was the lesson that I needed to learn at 20 years old, that I could dig in. I could dig in and I could find strength to carry me forward, even if I couldn't see what was below me or behind me, or I couldn't identify what was in front of me, that I could trust in myself. And that was the moment that I recognized nature as a powerful teacher. That was the lesson I needed to learn at the right time. And then fast forward to a few years ago, when our nation was just we were rocked with varying opinions regarding the police involved shootings that were happening. And I live in Oakland, California, and we were bracing for public protest. I believe that public protest is absolutely it is appropriate, and I think that it's a tactic that has been effective in shifting us toward change. I felt that there was something else that Outdoor Afro needed to do, and I wasn't sure what it was. And I was leaving work and, seeing the city preparing and just bracing itself for violence. I didn't feel good about that. And I was walking to my car. The helicopters are already overhead, and it's drawing to the close of the day. So there's all this kind of frenetic energy in the streets. I asked myself, what am I supposed to do right now? And the answer came to me, and it was, Rue, you do nature. That's your lane. So I immediately activated the local network and some of our national partners and Outdoor Afro leaders at the time to do healing hikes. I went out that weekend with about 30 people in the Oakland Hills, and we went to this clearing, and we did some yoga and just some intention setting in that moment. And we went down into that redwood bowl, and I could just feel the release of the tension, the strain. Not everybody had the same opinion. These were majority African Americans, but we all had different points of view. But we were able to hear each other in a different way. Those woods were able to absorb the excess of our emotion. And as we worked our way down to that stream trails, there's a stream trail in Redwood Regional, which is a part of the East Bay Regional Park system. We stopped and we reflected. And I realized that we were doing what African Americans have always known that we could do. And that's to lay down our burdens down by the riverside. That was the moment that it became very clear to me that nature is a powerful healer. We set intentions as we ascended from that trail about what we might do in our communities, what we might do in our workplace, what we might do in our homes to affect the change that we wanted to see. was a powerful moment. And we've been doing healing hikes ever since, and have since created some more structure around that so that leaders, if they want to have a theme around healing, that we're using accessible language and intentionally holding space for people who need it for any reason.
I recently spoke with Jackie Patterson of the NAACP and a dear friend, Bronte Velez, about the narrative of alienation of African Americans from nature that in part is a myth that works to further alienate, but also there is truth to it, perpetuated by historical realities. And I'm wondering, from your experience, what is the pulse coming from Black youth in regards to their own self-identification with nature?
A couple of things are true, absolutely true. And it touches on what I said before. Black people have always had a connection to nature. It just hasn't always looked like, the single person, the guy standing over the sweeping vista after he has summited the big mountain, right? So I think we have to adjust our lens, our focus, to look at how people are connecting to the outdoors. And the thing that's so important for me to remember as I'm talking to people about connecting to the outdoors is that nature is not an other. It is who we are. We are nature. Our bodies are made up of water. Women are cycled around the moon. We have so many connection points to nature. And what I hope to do is just help people to begin noticing how they already are connected. Now, when we talk about specific activities, specific locations of those activities, then we absolutely will see some of the differences surface. So, for instance, remote wild wilderness is not necessarily a place that feels safe for African Americans to venture in alone. We can turn to the plaintive lyrics of Billie Holiday's Strange Fruit. And those lyrics are talking about lynching. It's a protest song, out of just the outrage that people were experiencing, that I believe, is extended to the kind of police-involved violence that we see today. And I feel that, we have a living generational memory of that terror in the woods. And we have those warnings from our grandparents not to go. And so that's a very valid concern. But I want to stop short of allowing that to be the reason that we invalidate or ignore or stop ourselves from meaningful connections to nature and recognize and elevate the importance of connecting to nature nearby.
Studying metamorphosis in a foreign language, struggling for the words to stick. They are pouring in. Will I manage to attain them? Something ancient and latent is aching to escape, and I cannot contain it, no. I cannot contain it, no. Studying metamorphosis without assistance or a syllabus, juggling with boulders in my fist, and I feel a little bit like Sisyphus, and I will calculate the distance that it will take to cross this abyss. And though it may be dismal.
In your TED Talk, you tell about how Outdoor Afro is also about learning, not only of ecology, but of people's histories embedded within ecologies, and how there is an abundance of untold stories of Black history in national and state parks. Are there any of these stories that you'd like to share with us? I'm also wondering if you could speak about the power in reclaiming those stories for African Americans in public lands that have been manipulated or left out of the American narrative, which by and large is told through the eyes of the colonizer.
That's a very important part of Outdoor Afro that we stumbled upon. Storytelling for us has always been who we were, but I don't think it came into focus just how important it was to dig into the narratives of these spaces, these places. And we found that once we told the stories of people who existed, who thrived, who triumphed in places, that we were not only, talking about the pain body of African Americans and that story, we're talking about the generative aspects of the culture in spite of, overwhelming oppression and systemic barriers. One story that comes to mind is the Monroe family, who came to gold country. And we have to keep in mind that the people who made money during the gold rush were not the people who were finding gold. It was the innkeepers, the tool makers, the clothing makers, the people who provided all of the means for people to pursue, gold mining. And this very savvy entrepreneurial family, the Monroe family, former slaves, came and set up shop and were the only African Americans in the town in Marshall, California, what is now known today as Marshall, California. And they thrived and they were extremely well off and were well regarded. And today, the blacksmith shop still stands, and it was the blacksmith shop of this Black family. Next door is their home that's still standing. And it's now a part of the Marshall Gold Discovery State Park, which is a California state park. It's, to me, very ironic, but not surprising, that while these properties and assets belong to the Monroes, the park was named for the white guy who was their friend. and so, there's erasure, maybe through lack of knowledge or even intentional. It's hard to say who was at the table to make that decision on the naming. But by coming up there with African Americans for whitewater rafting, which we do every year on the American River, to tell that story about a thriving African American family in a location that really doesn't have an African American community today, and it's fairly conservative part of the state, makes people feel a sense of belonging and a care that comes from locating one's own history in that place. And so we find that over and over, we have the opportunity to tell stories of African Americans who literally lived on a place or something that they overcame in that area. Or we can remember historical figures, like a Harriet Tubman, who absolutely was a wilderness leader, who absolutely understood the earth as a resource and a respecter of the earth, but used it as a platform to help people get free. And I think that there's a big part of our work that celebrates the spirit of helping people to get free.
The Homestead Act of 1862 didn't include Black folks. People freshly emancipated from slavery were given pieces of abandoned land in the Confederate South, only for it to be taken away shortly after when pardoned plantation owners pressured the federal government. So I'm wondering, how do pieces of history like the Homestead Act that lie in an unbroken thread with more recent injustices, such as redlining, gentrification, and police brutality, continue to shape the dispossession of people of color from land?
We all know why African Americans are here. We were here for the purpose of providing labor to build this country into what we know it is today. There are definitely feelings that the usefulness of us in this country is differently viewed today. And there have absolutely, all the things you mentioned are true. The systematic erasure and censure and terror that African Americans have experienced in this country. You know what it makes me feel like? It makes me feel like we are amazingly resilient when you think about just making it through the Middle Passage and being able to still pursue education and family bonds, throughout the darkest periods of our lives, to still have joy, to still be able to let our soul shine, is a triumph with these conditions that we're talking about. And that's a big part of what this work is all about. It is about really, it's about reclaiming, for sure, our ability to be connected to land in a generative way. It's also about being American, because we are here. We've been here. The bones of my ancestors of the past 400 years are here. And so being out in nature, telling these stories, is a way of not only our Americanness, but of remembering our triumph and our potential for possibility to continue to be here in the future. I think about the Redwoods, for instance, in the Oakland Hills, and I talk about how they were all clear-cut in the gold rush in service of producing housing for all these miners who came to town. And now you can go to those redwoods that have regrown. We have second and third generation of redwood stands in the Oakland Hills and elsewhere, coast redwoods. And, theirs is a story of regeneration. And I think that nature holds lessons like that for us, and it gives us hope. And it also, for me, nature is a way for us to be relieved of the stress of racism that we all live with. I don't care if you're Black or white, we all feel the pressure of that cancer. And when I'm in nature, the trees do not know what color I am. The birds don't know what my gender is. The flowers don't know how much money I have in my bank account. And so I think that we can rely also on nature to be that equalizer for us, and to just shed that weight, even if it's just for an afternoon or, an 1 hour stroll on a trail. That possibility is there for us.
There is this often arising argument about how people of color and oppressed peoples in general don't have time to engage in environmental justice because they're focusing on basic matters of survival, or that social justice matters are more crucial. And although I think that there is truth to these statements, I also feel that environmentalism isn't only about protecting polar bears or rainforests thousands of miles away, but also very much about hazardous waste facilities dumping toxic sludge into the SF Bay, or coal plants making children sick. And we know that environmental racism is extremely real, and that people of color are disproportionately impacted by environmental degradation. There's never been a separation between environmental and social justice, and I don't think that there ever will be. And so I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, and where do you think this polarization stems from?
One of the challenges I have with the traditional environmental justice viewpoints is a reinstatement of the pain narrative in the outdoors and in nature. And I think we have this opportunity to to help shift this narrative that the outside or where you live, is a bad place, is a dangerous place. A colleague of mine put together a really wonderful curriculum, and it's available online for download, called What's Good in My Hood. And it's basically a mini bio blitz that young people can do where they live to make observations of things like wildlife in their neighborhood, and to start noticing, how is the wildlife sustaining itself? And it moves you through this continuum of noticing, counting, and all the way to the end where you actually can write in the name of your local elected official, and including the President of the United States. And so I think that we have this opportunity to have an asset-based conversation, and to really get people to love, what we do have. We all have something in nature to love right outside of our window. And it is absolutely true at the same time that we do have vulnerable communities living in very environmentally stressed conditions. And we absolutely have to find a way to mobilize the kind of support that's needed to transform those communities into healthier ones. Yet we also still can find ways to understand that nature is in the outdoors, the environment is not in and of itself here to harm us. And the human hands that have turned us in that direction, we also have human hands and minds that can shift us in an opposite direction. And that's the space where Outdoor Afro wants to be. And I just, I can't say enough that, we absolutely talk about nature and people and the pressing needs that individuals have in one conversation. So it's never Outdoor Afro out for nature's sake only, but it's about how we can be in a platform of understanding nature to better understand ourselves.
In your TED Talk, you also speak about how it's not effective to try to rush people into conservation, that relationship to place and land and community in general really is foundational. So I'd really like to hear you expand on this train of thought.
I often will see young people, for instance, be encouraged to go and take environmental action. And I think that's great to get people started at a young age, thinking about the environment, making good decisions about how to behave in a way that's environmentally conscious. What's challenging at times is when young people, especially young people of color, are asked to go out and perform conservation-related activities in places they've never been. For instance, if I see kids out at a beach doing a beach cleanup, my question is, have they ever played here? Have their toes ever dug into the warm sand? Have they ever laid on that beach and heard the waves and the gulls on an afternoon? Like, these are the things that inspire me to want to get out and take care of a place because I have a relationship with it. And I just feel that, we rush along that relationship because of, it's something we feel is urgent, which is totally reasonable. There's a fair amount of philanthropic pressure, so if the grant guidelines or deliverables include connecting with communities of color to do a specific activity, then people are going to create those scenarios to satisfy the funding requirement. But I think that, we have to just remember why we do what we do. I do this work on top of a long, long lifetime of experiences that I've threaded together that make me care for places, even places I'll never go, because I understand the connection between, remote wild places like the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge and, Oakland, California, where we see the same birds during the migratory season along the Pacific Flyway. So I just feel that, we have this opportunity to help people build relationships. And on that basis of their relationship to nature, they will want to take care of it. But it's not going to happen sometimes on the timetable that we want it to happen. And we have to help co-create and facilitate, other creative solutions beyond one-time beach cleanup days, but that it becomes a lifestyle. It becomes a part of who you are, but it's born out of a relationship and not a transactional request.
Oh, this land that you pass over is my heart, is my daily bread, my soul, my herald heart. And on that winding road to home that I pass through, the land is you, the land is you. Throughout many years, this river has changed its path. One bridge burned, another built, bigger than the last. Oh, I grew a tree I knew would be cut down, and I built a fence and tore it to the ground. Oh, this land that you pass over is my heart, is my daily bread, my soul, my herald heart. And on that winding road to home that I pass through, the land is you, the land is you.
When you do feel connected to a place and you fall in love and you build this relationship, you are more apt to stand for it and to put your energy into protecting those spaces that you build relationship with. But then, of course, the flip side is this urgency when we're seeing so much destruction happening to Earth daily, and the fear that arises with so much resource depletion and species going extinct. It's this balancing act, and I really appreciate how you brought up the time scale, because I think, at least for me, in this human body with my human lifespan, it can get difficult to take a step back and think about these issues in a deep time sense, and understanding that things take time. They take time to heal. They take time to destroy, even though it seems like destruction happens much quicker, at least at this rate in the industrial world. I think this is really a challenge for the movement towards regeneration. How do we balance our urgency and what we're seeing, and also realize that we need to go deeper in our relationship buildings with land and with each other to really see sustainable shifts and being able to dismantle the systems that are so entrenched in so many threads of our lives.
Yeah, it can be overwhelming. And I just, sometimes I'm in these rooms that we're talking about nature, and people are talking about the fight, and, it's just like super tense and aggressive. And I'm like, whoa, let's not forget the love here. Let's not forget the joy, why we do this work, the types of experiences we have in this work, how it makes us feel, the motivation behind, doing some of the heavier, not so sexy lifting. And I think that's what keeps me going, is remembering that this is a love story, right? It's not a fight story, it's a love story. And it allows me to show up in this work in a much more powerful way, with more agency versus defensiveness. And it allows us to be heard, quite frankly, in a different way. And so I have come to greatly value that. That said, I think that with any kind of social change, there have to be many types of voices, levers and pulleys and policies and science and PR, and there's lots of different ways. But this is, for us, our way, and it's become so clear to me that, as I mentioned before, to stay in my lane. We can't answer all questions and be able to do all things, but we can powerfully dig in with what we love and what we know, and link arms with others to shore up the rest in order to see sustainable change.
I needed to hear those lessons right now. I really resonate with staying in your lane, and it's a love story.
It's easy to get pulled off your block, right? It's easy. Like, for instance, this is a good example. We get lots of calls around diversity and inclusion, because obviously the traditional environmental movement doesn't necessarily reflect what America looks like when looked through the lens of what we consider the environmental movement. I mean, there are people who could shape it in other ways, and we choose to with Outdoor Afro frequently. That said, we have to reframe, I guess, what we imagine an environmental leader looks like, right? But what we frequently get requests for is how to be more diverse. How can we attract more people into our group? How can we get more people to come on our trips? How can we get more people to love this place as much as we love this place? Honestly, I don't have answers. I do not have answers, because our outcome with Outdoor Afro is absolutely diverse. And, we certainly don't have a diversity problem. But I cannot package that into the answer that I think a lot of people are seeking right now, to figure out how to be something different. And once I got clear that that was not what I was here to do, that I'm really here to dig down and double down on Black joy in nature, it's so relieving, because there are people, I think, who can do that work with a lot of expertise and experience that we don't have. And I want to make sure that whatever I do in this field of environmental support, that I'm doing it in the best way, and knowing your part to play in this is so key.
What a good pep talk for not just me, but I'm sure so many others that are listening to this and feeling the overwhelm of their place in this huge love story, and waking up and having the confidence to move forward in their role, and that their role is specific and unique to them. And I'm also really curious about the role of urban green spaces in all of this. Of course, you can't substitute a city park for a remote mountaintop, but the more you open to a connection with the earth, the more you can be in touch with plants, animals, everywhere you go. As population continues to rise and cities become more dense, preserving and expanding urban nature becomes even more crucial. And I'm wondering about disproportionate access connected to racial segregation and injustice to green spaces in cities, particularly as it ties to gentrification. And what are some of the feelings people involved in Outdoor Afro express in regards to urban nature, or in regards to connecting with nature in an urban landscape?
First off, I would want to gently push back on the assumption that while different, one is not superior than the other when we compare urban nature close to home with remote, capital W, wilderness, right? I think it's all relative to who you are and your life experiences. And I think that's probably one of the biggest challenges that I have faced in this work where, there's this hierarchical viewpoint of what nature is. And, if you're not driving 4 hours away from your house to go to a pristine wilderness, an untrammeled by man place, that you're not really doing it, And so I want to make sure that we keep the legitimacy and validity of local nature right in front of people, because the fact is there's wildlife all around us. You may not see it, but it's all around us. I mean, it is it's a part of the lived experience, no matter where you are. Do you necessarily have habitat for it in your house? No, but you go outside in the evening and you're going to run into perhaps a skunk, an opossum, deer, raccoons. There's just wildlife everywhere. And of course, birds are everywhere. All you have to do is look up. And so I love to shine a big light and help people, recognize that we have so much diversity of nature. I mean, even just walking my dog in the neighborhood, noticing, the life cycle of plants, from, seed to bloom, or perennials, or, just the smells, in the air, especially this time of year as we're on the verge of things blooming. There's so much to notice and appreciate close to home. And that said, I have had challenges with some of the ways that communities who have waited and worked and advocated for even, for north of a decade, even in some cases, for that park to be in their neighborhood, long past the time when their children could actually play in it, right? That those areas that have green spaces absolutely are more desirable to live in, and can accelerate gentrification because property values are going to increase with the proximity of and the walkability of green spaces nearby. And it absolutely creates economic pressure on the people who live in those communities where these changes occur. And I think that if we're going to advocate for green spaces to be in closer proximity where people live, we have to also think about displacement in the same and talk about displacement in the same conversation. There's a kind of a anecdotal understanding in Oakland where I live that if you see bike lanes, then gentrification is coming soon in your neighborhood. And because, bike lanes just appear out of nowhere and there isn't, community engagement. It's a good thing for more people to ride their bikes. Yes, we all can probably agree with that. But unless we actually have communities authoring how these decisions are made and how they're implemented where they live, then we're going to see a huge disconnection between how people use them, appreciate them. And I think that, it's the same thing is true with green spaces in my observations. We have a long way to go, but it's a challenging phenomenon that I don't think could have been foreseen at the time when people were advocating for parks close to home, what these specific outcomes would be, and the awareness that we have today of the crush of population influx into urban areas is.
Something you brought up at the beginning of our conversation, and there's two things that I want to speak of. One, that there's often times where potentially a person of color may not feel safe going out into the wilderness alone, and then potentially this fear of violence or, needing protection. And then there's also this other point that you mentioned about, I think, gun violence or police brutality. I don't remember which one. And so when I'm thinking about these feelings of not feeling safe and the atmospheres of persistent violence and racial profiling, and I would love to hear your opinion on how more people in connection with the earth can help disrupt cycles of violence.
Violence, it sometimes doesn't take the form of physical violence, I'm not sure if you're familiar with the term microaggressions. It shows up most of the time, and for most people, when challenged in nature, looking more like, oh, so who are you here with? Why are you here? What group is this? Getting questioned, getting stares, people acting fearful of you, people over welcoming you. That's a thing, getting over welcomed in a place. So I think we all have a part to play in a couple of ways. One, I hope that in the work of Outdoor Afro that I'm helping people feel a sense of agency, ownership, and belonging in places that they can begin to use and be in the safety of a group that shows them how, right? And that through that experience, they can go back on their own. And we see this all the time. We see people all the time, like show us pictures, and, we've seen other groups form that go to places we've been. And so we really hope to pioneer in people's lives the connection to nature if it's been disrupted, and celebrate those who have that existing connection. And then I think that from the side of folks who are, frequent users, who are not people of color, to just be ordinary. We want people outside in nature in proportion to their population and their opportunity, and it not being a big deal. And so I think that's the not do that I would say is important. It's just being with people and allowing people to be in nature is something that we absolutely feel is important and valuable.
Thank you for bringing up the microaggressions. Here I was thinking on a different scale, and just to hear the many levels in which violence can play out and divisiveness can play out is so important to take in, not just intellectually, but somatically, because how we interact with each other often leads to separation. And so I feel like that's a really important point.
Yeah, I'll tell you kind of a funny story really quick if I've got time to illustrate my point. So I get out in nature, pretty frequently, and it's it's a wonderful tribute to the work. But I can see that if it wasn't me, how it could be viewed differently. And that is, oh, wow, have you heard about this group Outdoor Afro? and so people know about Outdoor Afro and want to rightfully connect me with Outdoor Afro, not knowing, that I am Outdoor Afro basically, but it's that kind of a call out. I don't know would be welcomed if you're just out trying to have a peaceful walk. You might not want to join Outdoor Afro. You may have your own thing going on, and I could see how someone in a very well-meaning way would want to make that connection, but it's something that I've heard frequently enough that I know it's happening to other people.
From what I gather, Outdoor Afro has already sparked so much connection in communities all around the country. I want to hear your thoughts on how you see this expanding and growing. What is your hope of this work for the future?
I've heard people talk about obsolescence, right? Like, will we always have to have a group like Outdoor Afro? Like, will we have, this wonderful moment where it just won't need to be anymore? And I think that Outdoor Afro will persist by virtue of the fact that there's something really powerful about building community and leadership in nature that looks like you. And there's no other place that I've found that exists in this way that, allows people who are African American to show up fully. Our leadership team is comprised of, men and women from so many different backgrounds, so many different experiences, class differences, you name it. We've got everybody in Outdoor Afro, and they all share two things. They share being Black and having a fire in their belly to connect people to nature. But everything else is, up for grabs in terms of identities. And I'm really proud of that. That needs to remain. And I think that, biggering for biggering's sake is not the goal. The goal for us is to deepen, what we have. And one of the ways that I hope to do so is for Outdoor Afro to acquire land. I want to recreate what was given to me that has blessed me immensely growing up, is that home place, is some place where we can go and be surrounded and enriched by the stories, by the food, by the art of African American culture, while also being a platform for bio blitzes and learning how to do outdoor skills like make a fire, growing food. There's just, I believe, an opportunity to create a true demonstration site as well as a retreat from racism in nature. Someplace where you can go and you're not going to get the inquisitive stare. You're not going to get questioned about why you're there or whose group is this. And you can just be. And a place that's welcome to everybody is something that I really hope to leave as part of my legacy for Outdoor Afro, and that can continue to expand well after, my time is up. But that's what's on my mind about place and space, because we borrow public lands to do our activities, and I'm grateful for that. But because they're public lands, parks, national parks, regional, BLM, you can't do everything everywhere. And I think that there's just something really important about, having a place to call home, given the ways that African Americans have been separated time and again and again and again from home, from our mother Africa, from what we were promised in the form of 40 acres and a mule, to redlining, to the recent loan crisis. We've had just waves of separation. And I think that having an Outdoor Afro home place that everybody can call home will be really powerful. When I think about where we're headed, permanency and deeper connection.
All the levels that you've shared with us of the microaggressions and then the macroaggressions and all of the pieces in between, and how actually having a permanent place to just be with the land, with the plants, with the sky, with growing food and learning these skills just feels so right.
Well, I'm so glad to share. And I think it's so important to share your dreams and your visions, because, you just never know. You just never know how the ripples, I've been doing this long enough to just appreciate the connectivity and to invite people into your dreams, what that means. And so I very much appreciate your words of support, because it's gonna require, so much more than me to make happen. So we invite everyone to engage at whatever level they like with Outdoor Afro. I always let people know that you don't have to have an Afro to be a part of Outdoor Afro. We welcome anyone who, has an affinity for this work that we do and supports it. But I also just want to remind us to take care of ourselves and don't be so hard on yourself. I know we're grappling with a lot right now, a lot of change, a lot of uncertainty. We owe it to ourselves to remember our love for nature and our love for one another, and importantly, the love of ourselves, and have faith that it's going to be okay.
Thank you for listening to For the Wild podcast. I'm Ayana Young. Musical guest for the show, Marianne McLaughlin with Studying Metamorphosis. Kendra Swanson with Heartland, and Harrison Foster with Beam. Our theme music is Silence Returns by Bo and Like a River from Kate Wolf. I'd like to thank our entire team here at For the Wild, our producers March Young and Andrew Storrs, research director Madison Migulski, and media director Molly Lebo. Thank you, and until next time.